Hey guys, JT here with Not Enough Knives. This is a two-part video. Part one is going to show you how to make custom bolts for your Umarex AirJavelin, save you some money. In part two of this video, we're going to show you how these things shoot. All right, guys, first thing we want to do is go over the tools and equipment you're going to need to perform this very simple project. I would recommend an 18-inch ruler. I would also like to throw in here, this is called an aviation scale. You can use this or a variant of this. Any kind of pliers that have some kind of like an open jaw design here. Two different grinding heads for your Dremel cutting wheel, a punch and a hammer, and the Dremel tool itself. First and foremost part of this mod is going to involve the actual length of your custom arrow. Umarex arrows that come in the kit come right at a length of 14.5 inches from the back of the arrow to the point where the tips attach. Now we're going to go by that. We're not going to go by where the insert is attached or where the arrow tip is, because we obviously are working only with the shaft when talking about the new arrows. A couple of points I'd like to touch on. The Umarex arrow does have a very custom dimension. The inner diameter, talking about the inner bore, it's the same inner bore of these crossbow bolts. However, the outer dimension of these arrows is about as thin as a standard arrow, between 7.9 and 8.2 millimeters. Now they don't make arrows like that conventionally, not that I know of. There's a few things that I had to test performing this modification, and the first thing I wanted to test is to make sure that the increased diameter of a crossbow bolt, which is what we're going to use to make these custom arrows, would not interfere with the locking system that the Umarex Javelin has. When you put the arrows back all the way into the launch tube, you want to make sure these usually push them into this cavity that bites them down, where you feel the little clink. You're not going to get that with these, and the reason is that because the outside diameter of these is a lot wider than the Umarex arrow. But as I came to test later in the video, you'll see that that did not affect our locking mechanism for using these arrows. You can use pretty much any crossbow arrow. I went with 18-inch because I found them very cheap on eBay. Basically, you want to use a carbon crossbow bolt arrow. Now, the reason, again, I'm touching on using crossbow bolts is because they use that inner diameter of 7.6 that these Umarex arrows have. I was able to find a 12-pack of these carbon crossbow bolts for like $18.99 on eBay, and it was like a 12-pack. Cost is what really incentivized this project to begin with. We're going to work on shortening this amount 3.5 inches to make it 14.5, the same overall length of the Umarex arrow. Now what I'm going to do with my Dremel, I'm going to make sure that when I put my cutting wheel on here, I'm going to put it at a length which allows me to make this cut in 3 tries, so that way I always have the arrow at 90 degrees with this flat surface of my Dremel. That will ensure that the cut is straight across and not at an angle. I'm going to make 3 consecutive cuts that will equate to my 3.5 inches that I need to shorten the arrow by. In order to do that, basically it's just simple math. You got to divide 3.5 by 3, and that is the length that I'm going to make from the wheel to this surface here. Now make sure you wear safety glasses when you do this. Please, I don't want to get anybody with carbon in their eyes or any kind of like debris from the cutting of the Dremel. I'm going to make these cuts. I'm going to come back and show you what to do after that. 14 and 5/8, close enough. Obviously the next step is we want to remove the insert that was sitting on the front of the arrow originally. Now we are going to glue this to the new reshaped arrow, and the reason we're going to glue it is because this is a system that works with air pressure inside the arrow. And this happened to me on my first prototype where I did not glue this insert. The arrow shaft actually stayed on the launch tube on the Umarex Javelin, and the insert along with the arrow tip flew off. Now it didn't fly very far, and luckily I was able to recover it to reuse the arrow. However, I don't want you to have the same thing happen to you, so obviously we're going to use glue. But however, the reason where I told you to have these other things handy is because we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of refinishing on this tube. All you want to do is you want to make sure you deburr it a little bit on the inside, and then you're going to remove this attachment and you're going to use this flat one in order to kind of just smoothen out that edge a little bit, enough so you feel like you can eyeball it pretty good, and then you'll have a smooth edge to work with. All right, so we're going to be ready to put our insert in there. Just test fit it to make sure everything's nice and snug. I recommend hot glue, and then just put a quick little bead inside. All right, guys, if you've been following, we're very close to getting this project done and over with. Got our insert nicely glued in. As you can see, our cut was nice and flat. It's all nice and flush. Now we're going to remove the knock because our arrow launches with the hollow exposed shaft. What you want to do is you want to get a firm grip with the jaw section of your pliers. Only on the knock, make sure you do not grasp the arrow shaft, although you do want to grab the greater part of the knock you can. You want to grip firmly around the clutches, and then you want to just slowly twist off. Now I understand, depending on the crossbow bolts that you originally bought, this might be able to work easy, or you might have to follow another YouTube video that explains how to do it in stages for more stubborn or even glued in knocks. Luckily, these did not come glued. I'll leave a link in my description on the ones that I particularly bought. These pleasantly just came right off. We're almost pretty much done. With your little mini grinder attachment on your Dremel, you want to set it to a very low speed, maybe even 1. And what you want to do here is, with a very steady hand and a very symmetrical motion, all you want to do is just taper this outer edge just a little bit. That should be good enough. Now, the back of the tube on the gun, it's originally made for this much thinner wall. We're using a much thicker wall now. So this new custom bolt that we're using, it won't be able to slide back all the way in the tube, which is okay. Primarily, those are just locking mechanisms from preventing the arrow falling out of the gun. Now, this will be able to engage the very first one. We're going to go ahead and position it. As you can see, it slides back very nicely. And then you're going to push, and you're going to hear that click. The OEM arrows, you hear that double click? I'll do it again. That 2-step click, that is just basically an extra O-ring that's in there. It's not meant to trap any extra air. It's not meant to create extra pressure. It's literally just an extra stage of locking so it doesn't fall out. But because of the thickness of this new arrow, the fact that it simply engages one O-ring is really good enough. Bang, that's all you need. One thing I highly recommend, just put a small bead of like just petroleum jelly right here, just so you have an extra little nice seal for air. That's it. One thing I really liked about this particular seller, they give you not only this 2-stage tip, it includes an O-ring, which is normally just a feature for you to not have to Loctite your arrow tips onto your shafts. But in the case of an air arrow rifle, one thing that I found particularly useful and necessary in this case is that that O-ring completely seals out any air that tries to escape on the other end of the shaft, which is the arrowhead. This is a 2-part video, as I said in the beginning, so I'm going to put a link here at the end of this video to the part 2, where we actually go out to the range and shoot these arrows. If you did find this informative, hit the like and subscribe button, tell your friends and family about it, and I'll see you guys at part 2. Peace.